Thank you everyone for joining us at the Competitive Advantage Talks presented by Kager, also known as Craft Analytics Group. My name is Ryan Smard, and I'm a first-year student at MIT Sloan. It is my pleasure to introduce the presentation, Minding the College Football Analytics Gap, presented by Teamworks. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Karim Kassam, Vice President of Product at Teamworks.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I'm Karim Kassam with Teamworks Intelligence. We provide analytics solutions to dozens of professional teams in all the leagues you see pictured here. Today, I'm going to focus on college football, and specifically the college football analytics gap, how the NCAA is a decade behind the NFL in terms of analytics capabilities, and why that gap is about to close. This is a picture of a much younger me around a decade ago when I was the first analytics hire at the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers were actually one of the first teams to hire a dedicated data scientist. At the time, the NFL was sort of integrating data science into football operations, slowly catching up to trends in baseball and basketball. Fast forward to 2025, and the NCAA, where college football analytics is around where NFL was then. You're starting to see major programs just post for their first dedicated data science positions, and there's still limited integration of data into coaching and personnel decisions. But all of that is going to change, in part because college sports is changing. College football has always had limited in-person evaluation capabilities. They have high school camps. A coach can go to a game on a Friday night. There's limited staff. Even big SEC schools might have 3 or 4 scouting department members. Most of the coaches in NCAA also double as scouts. College football, though, all of college sports is at an inflection point. Never before have they had anything like free agency. Now there's going to be a salary cap. Now there's going to be a transfer portal, and all of a sudden, a couple of scouts and a position coach are expected to evaluate hundreds of players and make offers within hours if they hope to sign them. If you are a college GM, what do you do with all of this change? Well, you only really have one option, and it's to lean into the change. I like this quote from USC's Chad Bowden: "Our business has changed. Every single day, something can change. We're going to be on the offense every single day, and we're going to attack it." College football teams are hiring GMs every day, and they're adjusting their personnel departments to deal with the mass of players in the transfer portal. In leaning into that change, we have an opportunity to bring NFL-level analytics to college. And that's why I'm here today, to share what we've built at Teamworks Intelligence along with our NFL partners, and to show how it's going to help college departments find and evaluate talent moving forward. To understand that gap, it helps to understand how football analytics has evolved. Before around 2010, teams were looking at numbers, but it was box score data. You don't need a data scientist. It's paper and pencil math. Everybody knows that 100 running yards is good for a running back in a game. Everybody knows that you want more touchdowns than interceptions. Then you get to the play-by-play era. Might not be big data necessarily, but it's 1,000 times more data than was available previously. This is when you see NFL teams start to hire dedicated data scientists for the first time, people like me. This is also where you see some of the effects of that data sophistication on the field. More aggressive fourth down decision-making, for example. And then in 2018, the NFL released ball and player tracking data to all of its teams, commonly known as next-gen stats. Once again, it's 1,000 times more data. And now one data scientist working alone on their laptop isn't enough. To get the most out of this data, you need hundreds of models orchestrated and working together. You need cloud storage, and you need cloud compute. We've seen this progression in every sport. And in every sport, the competitive advantages go to the teams that are using the richest sources of the data and doing the most with it. To get that advantage now, you have to be looking at player tracking data. And it takes more than an individual. It takes a team. I want to take just a moment to talk about our team. What started as Zealous Analytics is now Teamworks Intelligence and has the largest collection of sports analytics talent in the world. We have more than 70 technical staff, 25 PhDs, a dozen people who have led R&D departments across sports. We're creating tools at the cutting edge of statistics and machine learning, And those tools are having real, meaningful impact on decisions being made by GMs across 5 different sports today. Literally today for the NHL with a trade deadline in just under 2 hours. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of the types of tools that we build. Change of direction, a trait that's important for every position on the football field but is difficult to quantify. And run game attribution, how we take a running play that involves 22 players on the football field and separate the specific contributions of the players involved. And then we'll take a step back and look at the full picture, how we give football teams a competitive edge. Starting with change of direction, or COD. The football field is big. Speed matters. Straight line speed, as measured last week at the Combine, matters. There's a reason that GMs pay attention to 40 times. But straight line speed on its own isn't enough. For a receiver to get open, for a corner to stick with that receiver, for an edge rusher to pressure a quarterback, COD is critical. Our process here, as always, is that we don't have to start from scratch. We start with research. We understand what's state of the art, what we can borrow from it, and how we can build on it. This is a difficult problem because there's no in-game published research. In part, it's because direction and orientation data tend to be really noisy. Players are turning all the time at different angles and different speeds. Sports scientists use the concept of the COD deficit to quantify change of direction. So you can kind of compare an athlete running in a straight line at a specific distance and then that same distance with a change of direction built in. And that delta tells you something about change of direction. The 505 agility test is an example of this. The athlete runs 15 yards in one direction, makes a 180-degree turn, and runs 5 yards back the other way. You can compare that to other athletes or that same athlete running 20 yards. We want to use that same framework and apply it more flexibly to game data. In the end, a fixed 180-degree turn isn't representative of the variety of angles and the variety of speeds we see on the football field. But research gives us a framework for capturing this complexity. We start by identifying changes of direction. On the left of the screen here, you see an animation of a play. This is a Justin Jefferson catch from a couple of years ago. He makes 2 changes of direction on this play. One is part of his route, and one as he gains yards after the catch. Here, the colors represent Jefferson's accelerations and decelerations. To identify Jefferson's changes of direction, we need to find his heading angle and how it evolves over the course of the play. Here it is plotted on the right. So this is a signal detection task, and we're using the gradient of this curve to identify the starts and ends of the COD, here marked by points, and the apex of the COD, the X, the maximum rate of change of direction. Once we have those, we can calculate the COD deficit by estimating the straight line speed of the same athlete over the same distance. Even when we have that COD deficit, though, we're not done. Both of these changes of direction by Jefferson have a similar COD deficit, about a second, but one is clearly more impressive than the other. On the left, he's running a dig. 80-degree change of direction, solid, but not outstanding by his standards. He's not close to his top speed. On the right, he's running a hitch. He makes a 170-degree turn, extreme deceleration, and then re-acceleration. So to properly evaluate receivers, we need to add context to understand what we should expect on these types of plays. And the context we add is initial speed and acceleration. It's harder to change directions when you're going faster. The angle of the COD and the rate of change of that angle. It's harder to maintain speed when you're making tighter turns. And the distance covered. It's harder to make a 90-degree turn over 10 yards than it is over 30 yards. There's a lot of steps here for a single metric. But when we've done all that, we can see the payoff. Here's a concrete example of why this analysis is available. This data is from the same player. On the left, you see his combine times, his 40-yard dash, and his 3-cone time, the drill at the combine that most directly measures change of direction. I've added percentiles for context. On the right, you see Teamwork's intelligence metrics. The speed measure is taken from ball and player tracking data and applying techniques from sports science, and the COD metric is just as I just described. Now, if you're looking to acquire a player like this, your interest is going to depend critically on what set of numbers you're looking at. If you're drafting this type of player and you're looking at his combine numbers, this is a potential late-round pick. He's a chance to make it depending on his hands, his size, his makeup, his ability on special teams. If you're looking at Teamwork's intelligence numbers, all those factors still matter, but his ceiling is way higher. His floor is higher too, and he might even be a first-round pick. Can anyone guess who this player is? Does anyone know? Receiver drafted in 2023. It's Puka Nacua, who set the rookie record for the most receptions and receiving yards and is poised to be the #1 receiver for the Rams for years to come. He was a 5th-round pick, 177 overall. And Nacua was a college transfer before he was a draft pick. He was available to every team in college football. Now, his 40 time and his 3-cone didn't help him at all. But looking at his movement on field, our model saw a different player. I want to show you just one of Nacua's CODs. This is BYU versus Stanford, November 2022. Nacua's number 12. He's at the bottom of the screen off the line of scrimmage in that stack. Now, I don't know what I would call this route, and I'm not even saying that this is a good route. What I'm willing to say is that Nacua exhibits some unusual athletic traits on this play. And one in particular, COD, is something that we can quantify objectively. And one of the best things is that you don't even have to take my word for it. Because our metrics come from film, you can always go back to the film and look for yourself. So again, Nacua is at the bottom of the screen in the back of that stack. You can always pull up film and see just what the model sees on that play. This is our receiver leaderboard from the 2023 NFL draft class. This is our eye test, our smell test, maybe the most important type of validation that we do. I've heard it described as the laugh test. If you don't pass this, you're going to have trouble getting buy-in. It's also the case that these outliers in this way, these are the players that you're going to focus on. These are the ones you're going to sign, retain, and draft. Making mistakes on the eye test is very costly. Seeing Zay Flowers at the top of this list gave us a lot of confidence because everyone who watches football knows how shifty he is, knows how elite his change of direction he is. Now, COD is just one metric. We're not suggesting that teams draft from a list like this or sign transfer portal players from a list like this. It's one important piece of the puzzle. The running game and a player's ability in the running game is another important piece. And our aim here is to measure a player's overall impact on this phase of play, and importantly, to do it from more than just running backs. Play-by-play will tell you that a running back gained 10 yards. You'll see who tackled him. Maybe you'll see who missed tackles. But 22 players are involved in every play. So how much credit should we give the running back for those 10 yards? Certainly not 100%. How much credit should we give a guard that pulls and seals off an edge? What about a tight end that blocks downfield? Or how about the defenders, a lineman that tackles him? Or maybe a linebacker that takes on a block in the hole at the line of scrimmage and limits space but never makes contact with the running back at all? How do we give credit to all of those players? Who's driving value? One way to think about this problem is to break it down into 2 components. Action identification. We want to identify all of the actions that players are taking on the field that impact the success or failure of a running play, and then action attribution. We want to take those actions and then properly credit those players for those actions. So this is what we want to do. We want to identify every cut, every tackle, every block, every pursuit angle, and give credit to the players performing those actions. I'll use this play as an example as we go through the model framework. This is from the first game of the 2023 season, Lions at Chiefs. You can see the play-by-play on the screen. Jay Gibbs, right end, pushed out at Detroit 47 for 18 yards. He didn't do it on his own, though. From the end zone, you might be able to see some of the blocks. But how did he do it, right? Who ultimately is responsible for the 18 yards? How can we divide it up? How can we divide that credit? In this case, we solve these 2 problems, action identification and action attribution, simultaneously using a graph neural network. A GNN is effective for this type of analysis because we can model not only the players, but the relationships between the players naturally within the graph structure. So we can say at this moment, for example, that Gibbs is 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, that he's moving laterally, but also we can say that Frank Ragnow is a blocker for Gibbs and that he's pulling. Players end up as nodes within the graph, and player relationships as edges. And then the graph network has the ability to discover local and global structures that impact rushing yards, things like specific offensive formations or potential routes for the runner. This 18-yard gain is the interplay of 22 players on the field, and the graph network lets us separate those contributions and attribute them to individuals. This is what it looks like for that Lions-Chiefs play. On my graph, my y-axis is expected rush yards, and x-axis is seconds since the snap. So it starts out as sort of a regular running play. It's going to gain about 3 yards. Gibbs' acceleration, though, is exceptional even at the NFL level. When he bursts to the outside, the model can tell that he's gaining space. And so it ends up looking more like an 8-yard gain than a 3-yard gain. Keep in mind, at this point, he's still 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage, but the model sees that potential. Split second later, Ragnow is pulled around the corner and sealed off Karlaftis. Sam Laporta is the tight end there. He's blocking Eric Reed 8 yards down the field. There is a ton of space here, and the model recognizes the potential for an explosive run. Then Gibbs runs into L'Jarius Sneed, the corner on the play. Sneed forces Gibbs back into the middle of the field, contacts him, and slows him down. The model drops the expectation, but then as Gibbs slips off the tackle, it ramps up again until Mike Dana and the rest of the defense chase Gibbs out of bounds. This is how we're dividing credit for the play. I'm going to show this play again. This time I'm going to highlight some of our contributions. You'll see percentile ratings for how we rate players in that phase of play. Starting with Gibbs, that elite acceleration. We're giving him a 96 out of 100 in this phase of play because he is creating space for himself. Then you have that block by Ragnow. Not only is he sealing off Karlaftis, but the entire Chiefs D-line is behind him. This is as good as it gets, and that's a 99 block for us. Same for Laporta. He's 8 yards downfield. Reed is in no position to make the tackle. Penei Sewell's out here running, just looking for work. L'Jarius Sneed forces him back outside, prevents a touchdown if he gets the edge, ultimately misses the tackle, but he's able to slow him down right here, and the rest of the defense kind of gets up to him. And then finally, Mike Dana comes in and finishes the play off. We give Dana a high rating here. I want to show you where Dana starts on the play to give you an intuition of why the neural network gives him that high rating. Here he is, wide technique, opposite side of the field at the snap. So he runs about 40 yards on this play, and the GNN rewards him. Like Mike Tomlin, our model has learned to love big men running, and it hates loafing. Within the feature space of the GNN, it has learned something that every defensive coach in the country emphasizes: maximum effort for those 4 to 6 seconds of a play. And not because we've taught it. In seeing about 100,000 running plays, the model has learned that big, explosive offensive runs happen when defenders are jogging. And so it credits players for hustling, and it penalizes them for loafing. The eye test, again, is important for us. It's necessary to see players like Saquon and Derrick Henry and Gibbs on top of our running back leaderboard. But more importantly here, we're able to give credit to other players on the field. This is the real value of this model. And we see Pro Bowlers on top of our center leaderboard. We see a promising rookie and 2 Super Bowl champions on our linebacker leaderboard. And we see some of the legends of the game on our defensive tackle leaderboard. So bringing this all together, I sometimes slip and think about this run game framework as a model. You know, a lot of these, they're more than just one model. Sometimes it might be 24 models calibrated and working together. Sometimes it takes years of data science and engineering effort. And the payoff is they allow us to measure these traits and these abilities with specificity. An athletic trait like change of direction is critical. It doesn't give you the whole picture of the athlete, though. Now we can add value by talking about how Nacua does in the running game, where he's a great blocker, and we start to fill out the picture. And then when we add speed and acceleration, ability to get off press, elusiveness with the ball, and maybe most importantly, hands, now we start to get a complete picture. And it's not just a single number summary, because Zay Flowers and Puka Nacua are both Pro Bowlers, but they do it very differently. And what they're going to produce depends on their role, depends on the scheme, and depends on the athletes around them. As you start layering in other positions, now it really feels like we're cooking. This is our digital scouting report. Each of these metrics took between 4 and 24 months of data science and engineering effort to put together. It takes a lot of time. The upside is that the report covers every player in FBS, and it updates after every game. It can do a tremendous amount of work. You imagine that small college scouting department, how well this can complement and supplement what they do. Notice the language here too. With high fidelity data, the computer starts to see the game a little bit more like the coach or the scout or the player. When we're in the play-by-play era of statistics, we might be talking about EPA per play or yards per route run. And these are great statistics. But not everyone in a football building has an intuition for what they should look like. They cause friction. Instead, we're able to talk about change of direction and burst off the line of scrimmage and run blocking ability. As the data get more complicated, we can make the communication easier. And what teams will be able to do with this digital scouting report, you can imagine the transfer portal is going to open on April 16th, and there's going to be 1,000 receivers in there. And teams will be able to use this to winnow that down to the 20 or 30 players that might make a difference for their team. The players that those GMs want, those coaches need, and the players that are actually going to drive wins for those teams. The digital scouting report is going to take what is an impossible task for a couple of scouts and a position coach and make it efficient. And in looking beyond the box score, even beyond the play-by-play stats, will help colleges find hidden gems, players who haven't been put in the right situation, maybe haven't racked up the yards, but have shown those traits, have shown those athletic abilities of what it takes to succeed at that level. Players exactly like Puka Nacua. I'll leave you with this quote: with the margins in football becoming ever so small, the difference between winning the division and having the first draft pick, making the playoffs, or being fired is a matter of 10 or 15 plays a season. I love this quote, but to be honest, I think it's an overestimate. The margins in every sport, professional or collegiate, are incredibly thin. As college sports evolve, as they professionalize, college analytics are going to advance rapidly. We're excited to have front row seats. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. We probably have time for 2 questions.
Hello. I just wanted to ask a question in terms of outreach. I know you kind of wanted to really get the high school scouting model more analytical through kind of your research. I was wondering how you plan on reaching out to programs and really kind of spreading your business model.
Well, the nice thing with Teamworks already works with every school in FBS and most of FCS as well. So we have that reach already, which is nice. You asked about high school. You know, this data isn't quite available at the high school level yet. There's not kind of high quality, all 22 video that computer vision can process and generate the ball and player tracking data. I think that stuff is coming fast. Like at every step, this is, you know, the technology in this space is evolving quickly, and it'll come to high school pretty quickly as well.
All right, one more.
Hi. Of the college sports, which one is the most ahead in analytics on the team side? That's
an interesting question. You know, I think professional sports, maybe just because of their budgets, they all end up being a little bit more advanced in terms of analytics than their college counterparts. I think it's sort of like a main effect. So the sports that are the most advanced at professional level tend to be the most advanced also at the collegiate level. It's probably baseball and basketball that way. But with these changes, the professionalization in college sports, feel like that gap is going to close pretty quickly.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. If you have any more questions for Karim, you can meet him out in the hallway.
Thank you.